Hey guys, welcome to the Midlane Masterclass. Now this session went a little bit differently than I expected because we had quite an intimate group. So what I actually did is I went through 2 VOD reviews focusing on the early game and going through everything you need to know about the early game. The reason I did this is one, because if I'm trying to cover the whole section of mid lane, so early, mid and late game, it's going to take too long, it's too complex, and you won't be able to remember it in one session. It's just too much information. So what I instead did is just focused on the early game, because this is basically where 99% of players need to focus on, and it's also a determinant of success for your mid and late game. If you don't have a good early game, it's harder for your mid game and your late game to be good, regardless of what champion you play. So I hope you enjoy. Yes, this is probably the first video also I've got without a hat on, because as you can see, lockdown kind of doing me dirty, but I've got a nice little mullet coming along here. I don't mind it. I look a bit like a fucking dinosaur. But anyway, guys, enjoy the video. All right, Guru. So your Galio versus Cassidy matchup, tell me about it. What do you kind of know about the matchup, and what do you kind of want to take away from this game?
Personally, I think this matchup is not really hard.
Yep.
But until level 6, because casting can have more chances to escape or deal more damage.
Okay.
So basically, I have to get a gold advantage till he gets level 6.
Cool. And you go Ignite. What's the reasoning for Ignite against Caston?
I don't know, I generally go Ignite. I used to go TP, but I don't know. Maybe I should have pro TP, but I forgot.
Okay. That's all right. Good trading. Cool. Why do you use your Q to to clear minions as well as your passive?
To be honest, I wanted to get both of them,
Okay.
but I don't
Doesn't.
know. Maybe I should have just killed the lower one with the passive and then just basic the other one.
Yeah.
I don't know why did I shoot there.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it doesn't use that much mana, so you're kind of okay doing it. But it's just a little bit overkill. Okay. Good dodge. Good job. Okay. That's a pretty decent trade. Okay, so we know Silas is going top side. Now, you thinking about what you want to do with your wave here at all?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Like I said, like I told you, my biggest problem is the wave management
Yeah.
and farming.
All right, so what do you know about
And
wave
sometimes
management at the moment?
I think I just push for no reason.
Okay. But you could consciously stop that, right? Like,
Yeah,
if you know you push for no reason, why do you think you push for no reason?
because I try to crash the wave,
Yeah.
but I can't.
Okay.
I
So
don't know
like,
why. I don't know why,
okay, so you're constantly trying to crash the wave?
but I can't.
Okay. Got it. firstly, why are you always wanting to crash the wave?
To um if I push the wave, then I get ganked. So
Yeah,
there's no reason for pushing here. So in general, I should just try to play safe.
yeah. So pushing a wave's always fine. Just make sure you have a reason to do it that makes sense. Like for example, pushing a wave, the only reason I would push a wave is if I want to reset or roam. Otherwise, I'm never pushing the wave, if that makes sense. So what you can do, so when you crash a wave, you can deny the enemy CS because they have to CS under turret, right? So generally players CS more poorly when they're under turret. But what you can also do is if you freeze the wave in the middle, you can actually deny the enemy CS by just sitting here, and then they have to position all the way back here. If this wave is even in the mid lane, let's go back to a moment here. Like this, you can actually come up to here and just stand here because it's a level 1 Kassadin, right? He can't actually do anything, and you win the trade because you've got your passive plus your Winds of War. So when we always want to push into turret, that's fine, but we just got to make sure we have a reason for it. So the first rule of wave management is like if you have a goal you want to achieve. So let's say you want to roam, then you should make your wave do what it has to do so you can roam. And generally, the best thing to do if you want to roam is you crash the wave. Um, Same as if you want to recall, you don't recall when the wave's even unless your enemy mid lane is also recalled. You always want to push the wave into the turret if you want to recall or roam. They're basically the only two reasons you want to crash a wave. There's no other reason you should be crashing this wave unless you're doing one of those two things.
All right.
Otherwise, because if you have it in the middle even and you're denying this guy CS, it's much easier to deny him CS by positioning aggressively rather than him trying to CS under turret. But you're doing really well. Like, this is good so far. Like, Kassadin's pretty low. He's down a lot in CS. Good. This is good. Going to, like, look to help your jungler a little bit. Talk to me about this ward.
Um, I put it there because I think it grants more vision because I can back off earlier, so I don't get ganked. Otherwise, I'll die.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe it's not so good,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know. I
That's...
I should fight the greater um position because like I should have put it in the bush
Mm-hmm.
or I don't know in the left bush,
All
you
right.
know,
Yep. All right, cool.
or,
So,
or basically in the other side of the river because Shako was there.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I'll just go through, let's do a quick little this is cool because we're kind of going through each of the concepts as like a masterclass would, but with a real game example. So let's move on to vision and jungle tracking. So one, you place this ward because you wanted vision of most likely Silas coming to gank you, right? So what was the
Yeah,
first thing we noticed Silas did in the context of this game? He did his red buff at level 2, then came to gank you. Do you remember which way he went after he ganked you? Did he go up here or back down here? Do you remember?
I don't think I remember.
Okay, cool. So what he did was he got level 2 and came and ganked you, which was really weird. But he then proceeded to go to his bot side jungle to, I assume, get his blue buff and his Gromp. Yeah, so there you go. Now, what you should be doing as a mid laner is a few things when you're thinking about jungle tracking and vision. The first one is the enemy jungler's first clear is very common and it's very predictable. So the average enemy jungler about 80 to 90% of the time is going to go red buff, Raptors, and then do a combination of their blue side, and then contest scuttle, gank top, or gank mid. So unconventionally in this game, the Sylas ganked you at level 2, which was never going to work. 1, because you did a nice dodge, and 2, because of Sylas ganking an Aftershock Galio. It's just not going to work. So he did an unconventional gank, but it still doesn't change where his jungle pathing is going to lead him. It's going to lead him to his topside quadrant. So what that means for you in terms of vision and jungle tracking is, 1, as a mid laner, you should always assume, unless you have information otherwise, that your enemy jungler started at either red buff if they're blue side, or blue buff if they are playing red side. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
And then you should then be, again, predicting that their jungle path is going to lead them to their top quadrant, and then they're either going to gank top, scuttle, or you between 2 minutes 45 and 3 minutes 15 to 3 minutes 30. So this ward timing is really good, but as you kind of said, the ward here, 1, isn't good, because what I would do is I'd place it here if I'm trying to protect myself from this jungle, because this ward here gives you vision here as well as here. So Sylas is never going to wrap around here, right, and gank you. So this ward's great for if you think the enemy top lane is going to wrap around, or the Sylas is going to wrap around, but they're never going to do it. So what I'd do is I'd either place it there, but because Shaco's here and he's got top priority, I would actually place it here, so then you can get the second scuttle. So what I would do is, because you've got priority, I would be helping Shaco get vision for bot lane, and letting him get double scuttle here, which is basically you as a mid laner helping the allied jungler secure objectives for him, because you have priority in the mid lane. So your crash in here is a really good job. But what I'd be doing is I'd be helping this Shaco jungle get both of these scuttles, with my vision and with my wave management, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So think of your vision and your wave not just for your benefit, but think of it for your team's benefit as well. Cool. So you come back to farming. Notice where Shaco's going to go. I've pretty much predicted it. He might go for a gank here, but I almost guarantee he's going to go for this bottom scuttle. Cool. Awesome. And, okay, you don't go on path to help him. That's okay. So the problem with this playstyle now is it's getting risky, right? You've got no health pots left, and we don't really know where Sylas is. We can predict that he's probably bot side somewhere. But you're now in this weird position where you're just pushing this wave in, Casten CSing under turret, and then you can't really do anything. So the benefit of you crashing it is Casten struggles to CS under turret when you crash it. But the problem is you never have any kill threat on the Casten if you're always pushing it in. So with wave management, you got to think about, again, what do you want to do in this lane? Do you want to try and kill Cassidy? Do you just want to deny him CS? Do you want to roam? Do you want to recall? What do you want to do in this lane right now? Because if I was you, what I'd be doing is I'd be sitting like here and just letting this freeze. Because every time... So this wave right now is going to slow push into you purely because of the reason of this minion's health. So this minion is going to die before these three do, which means this is going to slow push. Yes, your passive's going to change that a little bit, but what you can do as a Galio is you can be sitting right here and denying Kassadin XP, and CS, which is way better than just crashing this into the turret, and it's also a lot safer for you. But instead, we're constantly pushing this in, which isn't that beneficial for us. Because, see, we never have any kill threat against this Kassadin. We've gone Ignite, right? But we can't, like, if we turret dive, it's kind of troll. Because he's got flash up and he can probably get away. So there's just never a good kill opportunity here. Yes, you're generating that CS lead, but you could do that just by freezing the wave as well.
Yeah, I got a question for that.
Sure.
I used to play Galio as well quite a while back, not anymore. I always thought it was pretty hard to freeze a wave with Galio
because he auto pushes with his passive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He only has AoE. Is there any tips on that?
Not really. You just got to kind of play it and accept that you are going to auto push a little bit. But what I would do is I wouldn't just be hard pushing. So it's kind of like Tristana in the bot lane where her passive is always going to give her that like pushing, I guess like advantage where she's always going to push in no matter how hard she freezes. So it's okay if that happens. But what I'd be doing is I'd be making it as slow as possible. So it's inevitable that the Galio is going to slow push into their enemy turret eventually because of his passive. But what I'd do is I'd try and extend it as long as possible. So just last hit when you can. And okay. Make sure you're never using abilities on the wave unless you're trying to hard push. And make sure you have a reason to hard push. And the only two reasons you ever hard push is to recall or to roam. And roaming means helping jungler, going to dragon, going to top lane, going to bot lane, doing anything outside your lane, I basically count as roaming, even if it's to get vision. So they're the only two reasons you'd ever hard push as Galio. The rest of the time you want to be slow pushing and zoning with your body. Because again, we've got, like, we're creating dead time, right? So we can't kill Kassadin and we're not roaming. So like right now, you could potentially be walking top lane. You've got all this vision. Bot lane's got no vision. You could just be walking top lane right now because you can't even do anything here anyway, right? You're just letting Kassadin kill these, whatever, 6-7 minions. So you actually have like a 30-second window to actually roam here. So if I was you, and so Galio auto pushes, right? Which means you can use it to your advantage. So if I was you, I'd push that. And now I would have, I've got, it's a 4 minutes 36. What I would do as a level 5 Galio is I'd walk straight up to top lane because I know it's pushed in. So what I would have done is gone, okay, I've pushed in my lane, which means I can do two things. I can recall or I can roam. I can roam bot lane, but they're pushed in, so it's probably not going to work. Well, I can roam top lane because it's pushed in, and this is a really good spot. Like, because you've got nothing to do here, you may as well be using this dead time to go do something on the rest of the map. But instead, you just sit here, look how many seconds. So 4 minutes 36. You also get ganked. Cool. So for 30 seconds, we got ganked and we didn't really do anything. Whereas in that 30 seconds, we could have gone top and probably burned Garen's flash. But now we're in really low health and we're kind of in danger. And this is okay. Good. Nice. Good job. Awesome. This is also why I don't like Ignite on Galio, is because TP just gives you a really good reset when you need it. So I would generally always almost go TP on Galio unless you're looking to kill the Kassadin pre-6. But with the playstyle you're going, you're never going to be able to kill this Kassadin pre-6 because the wave's always pushed in. So with your playstyle and basically how Galio should be played is I'd probably almost always go TP. Just because it allows you better macro control. So what I'd do right now is I'd hard push this in because Silas is dead, so you're pretty safe. And then I'd recall. So I assume you're going to recall after this. We'll see. Awesome. Cool, so you've got a really good CS lead already. You buy Blasting One Amplifying Tome. I probably would have gone Boots here, but that's okay. You're going for like pure stats, which is fine. Awesome. So there's nothing really to do on the map here, so you can do whatever you want with this wave. You can hard push it, you can slow push it. Go for the hard push, which is fine. Cool, so your jungler indicates that he wants to go for top scuttle. Good, you rotate. Nice. Uh-oh. Hello. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, guys. Can you guys hear me again?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Sorry, my stuff said. Awesome. So again, what I would do here is I'd push this in and then I'd roam. So when you've got a dominant lane, right, like this, Galio versus Caston, the matchup, so by default, you're dominating just in champion identity. You can kind of go through every champion matchup and go, do I dominate this lane? Don't I? This Caston could be playing more aggressive and contesting you, but one, his champion doesn't really allow it, and two, the player playing the champion isn't playing aggressive and isn't contesting you. So this should mean two things for you, and you should be thinking about this every game as a mid laner. One, traditionally, what does the matchup do? As a Galio versus a Caston, let's say both players are of equal skill, the Galio is always going to have the lane advantage up until like level 11. That's just the traditional matchup. Why? Because Caston scales and Galio's really good at pushing and fighting in the early game because of his stats. He's just a really strong 1v1 early game champ. So that's the first part. Then the second part is, what is the actual individual player's skill level and personality on that champion? So those are the two things every mid laner should be thinking about when they play mid lane. They should be thinking, one, what's the traditional matchup of champion versus champion? And two, how aggressive, how smart, how good is the enemy I'm versing compared to myself? And those two points of information should be dictating how you play and what you do. If this Caston was really good, I would suggest your playstyle right now is quite good. You know, you're staying in lane, you're just pushing, and he'd be contesting you a bit more. But because all this Caston has showed you is, the number one thing that I'm reading from this Caston is he is completely fine with you pushing him into your turret because you're never roaming. So he's completely fine with it because it works for him. He just wants to scale. Caston wants to get to level 11, level 16, and you're basically letting him do it. You're denying him a bit of CS. You know, you've got a 20 CS lead, which is almost a kill. But you're not maximizing your lane advantage properly. What you should be doing every time you push this wave in, you need to be roaming. Bot lane, top lane. You're helping your jungler, which is the first step, which is really good. But I want you to extend that now to actually helping other lanes, because this is super free for a Galio with Ignite, with Flash Up. What I would do is I'd hard push this. and then I'd roam right now. It's 7:47. I would leave this lane. Cool. And you do exactly that. I hope you commit to the roam because this is super free. Good. They spam ping. Awesome. See how much pressure you create when you go off the map? Did you see how many spam pings there were there? That's the first time you've actually looked for a roam outside of your lane at 8 minutes. Yes, you've helped your jungler take scuttles twice, but just look at how much like chaos you created in the allies' comms. You just like got 10 spam pings for the lane to back off, and now your bot lane's really safe. And you can keep doing this. Every time you push in this wave, you can create this like chaos of communication on the enemy team. And what you can do is eventually, every time the Kassadin spam pings, the bot lane gets a little bit less alarmed because they get a bit complacent. They're like, oh, Galio's missed, but he hasn't come bot yet. La la la. And eventually that roam is gonna work out. It might not work out the first time, it might not work out the second time, but you being off the map and the enemy not being able to see you is just as much pressure as you actually being in the lane itself, basically, as a Galio. Because they don't actually know exactly where you are, and they're going to back off because of that. Whereas when you push this wave in and you just sit here, Kassadin and his whole team knows that you're staying in the mid lane. So whenever you push the wave, you always need to either recall or roam, and you need to do it out of vision of the Kassadin. So you always need to be playing with vision. I guess this is a concept for the Masterclass. Playing with you being out of vision, it's a really scary threat. Whenever you as a mid laner are out of vision for the enemy mid laner, the team gets scared. So you got to use that advantage. Whenever you're out of vision, it's a threat on the map, regardless of what you're actually doing when you're out of vision. If you're out of vision, the enemy team doesn't know where you are and what you're going to do, and so they all have to play differently. Particularly because of a Galio who has a global ult. It's not, I guess, global, it's like semi-global, but you can basically get to bot lane from here. Cool. Awesome. Bit of a random Q, but that's okay. It's fine. See again, we're doing this. We can't do anything here. What I would be doing is I'd be walking top lane or I'd be helping bot lane. I mean, bot lane just got the kill, so they're probably fine. Do you see how much like impact that can do, Guru? If you leave every time you push this in? Like, I guess you're trying to get plating here, right? So technically you could stay for this one because the 180 gold plate is worth it. But does that make sense, like why you should leave lane every time you push into turret?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because particularly when you look at the identities of Kassadin versus Galio, all Kassadin wants to do is scale, and Galio wants to basically get some early game pressure because of that. So right now, what you're doing is you're basically playing to Kassadin's win con by constantly pushing this and never roaming top or bot. Which is okay, but it's kind of a bit risky to play like this. And Silas is also camping you, which is a little bit unlucky. Okay, talk to me about the 9-minute corrupting buy. Why do you go for this?
I don't know, because Galio needs a lot of mana, even though he has a pretty good mana management.
Yeah.
He's not like Nocturne or other champions that consume mana really fast.
Yeah.
But about Galio, I think I'm sometimes overstaying and I'm not recalling so frequently. So basically, corruption, potion, it's a pretty good item.
So yeah, I guess you could say that. My counter would be you're basically band-aid fixing a bad habit you have with a corrupting potion. So two things that you just said were mana management and then overstaying. These two things are completely preventable by conserving your skills and using them with purpose, and then by recalling at the correct times. So the first one, conserving mana, is don't just spam your spells unless you have a reason. And the second one is Galio doesn't actually have that much of a mana problem. You've never really run out of mana in the first 10 minutes of this game. Like, I haven't seen you not being able to use an ability or do a combo because you're out of mana in the first 10 minutes of this game. So the first thing I'd be like is, yeah, you can go corrupting, but if you don't have mana problems for this game specifically, it's just a waste of money. It's not a very valuable item either at 10 minutes. It's a valuable item as your first item if you're going to poke a lot in lane and you're playing like Time Warp Tonic and Biscuits, but it doesn't really work for Galio. Galio doesn't actually need corrupting for mana management. His Q's actually pretty low mana, like 85 mana with a Doran's Ring. You can basically get your mana back 6 mana. You can basically get it back per wave, and you only need one Q, Winds of War, per wave anyway with your passive. So you actually don't have a mana problem unless you're constantly trading with the enemy, which in this case you aren't. The next thing I'd say is your recalling hasn't actually been bad. You've been doing it pretty much correctly at the right time. This ward again at 10 minutes. This ward should actually be bot side because Dragon's up as well. Because that's probably the more likely objective. Cool. We'll watch 5 more minutes of this game. And then I'll go through a game of mine where I show how to play a lane a bit more like this, correctly like this. Good roam, by the way. Awesome. This is what I want to see, but more of it. All those opportunities I've suggested to you are opportunities where you could have done something similar to that. Nice. That's fine. Cool. So you're missing a couple of CS every now and then, but that's just better last hitting. Cool. So again, we're wasting time. What I'd do is I'd just walk top with Shaco, with Mordekaiser. You've got your ult. So you can jump into this fight pretty easily. But instead, you're just staying within vision of Kassadin. Because maybe you're trying to look for a kill, but based on how that lane's gone the whole time. Awesome. You rotate. See, if you roamed a little bit quicker, you would have got that kill there. That's okay. Let's see what happens here. That's fine. Okay. Cool. I'd reset now. Why would I reset now? One, you've pushed the wave in and there's heaps of minions, so it means you get a free recall. Kassadin's not going to be able to push the wave. Two, the enemy jungler and the enemy team knows exactly where your enemy jungler is, and that's topside, which means you're very vulnerable right now. Yes, I can see Silas on the map, so I should take off this vision, but this is just a really dangerous spot for you to be in without flash. If I was being dangerous like this in mid, what I would actually do is I'd be sitting here. Because I know this is probably the safest part of the jungle because I was just there. Whereas if you're sitting here, this is the most dangerous part of the jungle because you don't have any information on this part of the jungle. So as a mid laner, you should always be idling either left side or right side of the map, depending on where you think or where you know the enemy jungler is. So if you know the enemy jungler's bot side, you should always be hovering the top like section, the top side section of your lane, because it means the gank's less effective. If you don't know where Silas is, but you like are kind of guessing, well, I was just in his top jungle, so he's probably bot side. You should be hovering here, here, or here, depending on where the wave is, or like, you know, back here. If you're like under turret, you hover there. But this spot here is super dangerous for you, because this is the most dangerous part of your lane right now. This is the safest, and this is like, you know, the middle. So one, I'd either recall here, or I'd position a lot more safely. Because as we're going to see right now... Oh, you actually get the kill. Okay, well, never mind. You do well there. I guess, you just fucking 2v1. Cool. So in principle, even if you can't, even if you are able to do the 2v1 and get the kill, in principle, the safest spot for you in that situation is still the top side. But that was a good solo kill. Okay. Sheka steals some jungle. Caston rotates. I would leave this lane right now and go bot lane straight away. I wouldn't even care about clearing. Good. That's okay. It's a 2-for-1. Awesome. Okay, perfect. Alright. I want to go through a game of mine now, and we're going to compare the differences of the playstyle. Did that help you, Guru? Looking at that?
Yeah, I think it helped me a lot.
Awesome. Basically, you just need intention. Wave management is all about what you want to do with the lane and why. So if you have a reason to hard push, that's how you should always be thinking about wave management. So like, yes, Galio will always auto push because of his passive, but as long as you have a reason for what you're doing with the wave. So again, like if you're hard pushing, it's always roaming or recalling. If you're freezing, it's because you want to deny the enemy mid laner and you want to have control over the wave. Because when you freeze, you get control over the wave, because if it's your choice to freeze, you get to dictate the wave, which is really important. And then, yes, you can let it, I guess, slow push, which is what Galio is always going to do. And that's basically if you want to build up an advantage to then crash and then roam or recall. Let me see. Let me just quickly find the game that I want to look at. All right. Okay, cool. So the game I want to look at today is Vladimir versus Katarina. I play the Vlad versus a Katarina, and I think this is like Plat 1. Plat 1/Diamond MMR. So I'm the Vlad, the enemy is the Katarina. Does anyone want to have a guess as to how this lane will play out? Let's say Katarina and Vlad are equal skill level. Katarina's got 370k points. I don't have any mastery points on Vlad. Does anyone want to have a go at describing this lane and how it will play out?
I would say that Katarina will dominate early. Maybe not 1 or 2, but definitely post level 3. But you will outscale her by a long shot.
Awesome. Anyone else?
Yeah, and the problem with Vlad is that for the first few levels, his cooldowns are really big, because his Q is around 9 seconds or 8 seconds, I can't remember well.
Yeah, 8.33. That's a pretty good guess. I've also gone cooldown. So as you can see, I went ability haste as my first rune.
Oh yeah,
cool.
And Katarina, of course, will roam 24/7.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's if she gets the wave correct, right? Or if I freeze it, I give her the opportunity to roam, correct? She could she could roam without any wave control, but it's kind of a bit coin flip, particularly when I have TP.
Yeah.
Any other points to add here?
I don't know.
Okay. No, that's
It will
pretty
be
good.
great.
Yep.
Only
It will
to
be
Katarina.
it will be just normal farming because both Katarina and Vlad will have just to scale off since Katarina at level 1 is not that good and Vlad is not either.
Yep.
So I think from level 2 or 3 we'll get a little bit more aggressive.
Awesome. And 2%, you had something to add?
Yeah, only looking at Katarina versus Vlad or entire team comp?
Yeah, you can look at entire team comp as well.
Neither of your jungles are gonna gank early, I'd say. But I would keep a look out for the enemy bot lane because Pyke loves roam.
Good.
Well.
That's a very good observation that actually plays out quite a bit in this game. What about so let's say you guys are the Vlad and you're, I guess, my belief of this lane is I think I can beat this Katarina. But I want to play it safely. That's basically how I'm thinking of this lane. And I'm thinking of that one because I've gone electrocute, which means I'm trying to go for like a little bit of lane dominance. And the second one is my ego as an individual. I'm like, I wouldn't say I'm like cocky or arrogant, but what I would suggest is I'm pretty confident in my own ability and I know the limitations of it. So yes, this cat's got 370k mastery points, but I know she never really has a kill window on a Vladimir if I play this correctly. So that gives me a lot of confidence that I can actually play this lane pretty correctly, and you'll watch what I do. Actually, does anyone think the Vlad... Well, I guess this is kind of risky, but is Vlad going to come out on top pre 15 minutes, or should the Katarina? In a macro, in a total game sense, who would come out in top? Traditionally.
I would say Katarina, simply because Vladimir is a typical scaling champ.
Yeah.
Even though Vlad doesn't have as bad of an early game as Kale, for example, but it's still not the greatest.
Cool. This is actually probably a good point. So, quick breakdown of runes for this masterclass. Generally, you go phase rush on Vladimir, but I wanted to have a little bit of early game pressure, so I went electrocute. So I took a sacrifice for my mid to late game by not going phase rush, which gives you a lot of extra mobility in team fights for a little bit of extra lane domination, because I didn't want Katarina to roam. So basically what all of you guys said was like, if the Katarina roams, this game can get really dicey as a problem. So what I did, I used my runes to try and eliminate one of, or like reduce the chances of this Katarina bullying me in lane, to take a calculated sacrifice for my mid to late game. So you guys can do this with Kassadin, for example. Like, if you're trying to be competitive in lane as a Kassadin, you can go fleet footwork instead of electrocute. You sacrifice mid to late game electrocute power. Like, you know, when you hit level 6, electrocute Kassadin's really good. But if you can't get out of if you can't even get to level 6, fleet footwork's really good option. You can do this with other champions like Galio, for example. Generally, the meta is going Predator. But if you think you're going to have a tough lane matchup, you can do Aftershock. And the list kind of goes on in top lane. Generally, you can always go Conqueror. But let's say you're a Trundle versus a Scion. What I would actually do in that matchup if I was the Trundle is I'd go like Grasp of the Undying, so you can actually be a little bit tankier and go against his little trades, stuff like that. So make sure, basically what I'm saying is, make sure you're always changing your runes based on how you want to play the game. Don't just go the same runes every game. You can actually switch up keystones, and you can switch up, you know, Taste of Blood instead of Cheap Shot, or Ravenous Hunter instead of Relentless Hunter for the extra healing instead of movement speed, stuff like that. Don't be afraid to mix up your runes based on what you want to do. Yep.
Dylan, can I ask you something?
Yeah.
If me as a Galio, I have a matchup against Katarina, can I go Predator since Galio counters Katarina pretty well?
Yeah. I would go Predator, but the problem is it's got to fit your identity as an individual, right? So Galio's identity as a champion is push and roam. But if you don't play Galio as push and roam, and I would suggest you should play Galio as push and roam because that's his identity, you don't want to play a champion out of their identity, right? Like, you don't, like, sure, like, there's tank Katarina builds, for example. Like, you could build tank Katarina, or you can build full AD Katarina, but it's not really how you should play her. And, like, yes, you can make it work, but what I would suggest is you should play Galio to his playstyle and his identity as much as possible. So for that example, I would say go Predator. You could even go Electrocute if you really want to lane bully and then roam, because Galio doesn't actually need Predator to roam. If you go like, even if you go Ignite, right, you can use your ult post 6 to roam, like, because you don't even have to be in the lane. But the other one is you're going to kind of constantly be pushing a Katarina in, so it's going to be similar to that Kassadin matchup where you've always got this dead time to roam. So what I'd suggest for you, Guru, is you actually need to change your identity to roam a lot more as Galio, and then you can start playing around with going Predator, going Electrocute, going Aftershock, and like switching these up based on how much you think you can roam. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. No worries. Cool. So I start pushing this a little bit. So my auto attacks here are intentional. You might just think I'm auto attacking for no reason here. I'm pushing this because I know I only have a single damage ability, and Katarina has her I don't know what it's called, a Q, whatever it's called, that hits multiple champions. So I push it a little bit and then I go for the last hit. Bouncing Blade. Yeah, that makes sense of what it's called. Cool. Not a good trade for me. If you don't know either, never stand near Katarina's blades. So you notice whenever she throws them, I'll always like path away. I missed that CS. But see what I'm doing here, which is what we weren't doing with the Galio versus the Kassadin, is I get level 2 first, sure, and like you could say arguably the Galio level 2 isn't as strong as a Vlad, but the Galio level 2 is. But what I do is I sit here and deny her getting last hits, any chance of getting last hits here. And now this is going to push. Similar to the Galio versus Kassadin matchup.
Cool. That's pretty much perfect because this is like the exact scenario of the VOD or the question I would have submitted.
Yep.
So I was actually playing against the Katarina as well, and I was playing Twisted Fate.
Yep.
And I usually like to play. I mean, I started E, of course, and just spammed auto attacks on her.
Yep.
She couldn't do shit. But I was kind of unintentionally shoving that wave pretty hard because she couldn't attack it, and I was, of course, I didn't want to miss any ECS. And then when we were level 2, my second wave crashed and I couldn't do anything. I tried to reset, but I had no gold, not enough to buy anything, and I didn't have any wards to place. What were I supposed to do?
So similar timing to this?
Yeah, the wave crashed a little bit earlier. This third wave didn't quite arrive yet.
Yep. So there's a few things you can do. One, don't let the wave crash like that in the first place, unless you want it to. So be intentional about it. Two, where did your first ward go if you've got no wards? You should have a ward by default.
Yeah, no, I placed it at the enemy raptors.
Okay, cool. So did you see the raptors get taken?
Don't remember.
Okay, so what I would
Probably.
go is if the lane's in a similar situation like this, are we red side or blue side?
Mm, we were blue side, I think.
Okay, so the wave's pushed in. Okay, so let's say we're blue side. Can we just keep it red side for this example? It's the exact same,
Yeah,
but
sure,
just so
sure,
it's
no worries.
visually the same. Okay, so we ward raptors. 90% of the time, enemy jungler is going to start red buff, right? This game, I know he started red buff. Oh, wow, he actually started blue buff. Okay, so either way, Raptor Ward would have seen him push here in your situation. So Raptors would either be gone or taken, right? Which means he's gone from red buff to Raptors, and then you can assume that he's gone here, and your vision will tell you. Your vision will either tell you that he's coming around to gank you, or he's coming around here. So the first thing I'd do in your situation is, yeah, identify where the enemy jungler is, and use that information to dictate what you should do next. So one, you could do a cheater recall. Even if you can't buy anything, if you've got no other option on the map, you could just recall and let the wave reset. The problem with this is you lose pressure, and Katarina could technically freeze the wave if she's smart. Two, what you do is you just hover whatever side you know the enemy jungler isn't on. So let's say you've got that ward on Raptors and you see him take them, and then you see him path this way. That means all you have to do as the TF is hover here or here or here, depending on where the wave is. If the wave's pushed in, you just hover here. And as long as you've got vision on bot lane, this is the safest spot in the game for you while still having pressure. So the two basically options are you stay in lane, but you position differently, or you recall. You could roam, but like a TF roaming at level 2 is kind of troll. Technically, you could do a roam like this. You could roam on a lane like this. But yeah, that's what I would suggest. Does that
All right,
answer the
thank you.
question?
Yeah, pretty much. I think that it actually turned out to be a gank by the enemy junglers, so I kind of trolled it. But
Yeah. So that's why I talk about enemy jungle first. So like your Raptor ward is the key piece of information that you should be using in that situation. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Can I ask you something about the matchup
Yeah, sure.
we're currently watching?
Yep.
I've been thinking about where you were asking the last question. Um, Basically, you started Q, I think, right?
Yep.
With blood. Uh, that's the ability that has the blood absorb, which heals you also,
Yeah.
if I remember correctly, right? Yeah, yeah. So basically, my thought was this: with Katarina, which basically starts becoming, let's say, breathable as a champion after level 3. Um, because you mentioned the whole aggressive playstyle as a person, which I share with you, which is why I was thinking about this. With Vlad, I have three things I see as even further points to, although he's a scaling champion, specifically against Katarina and her whole person style as a champion.
Yep.
The first 30 to 40 seconds before the second wave even comes, I mean, um, couldn't you basically have positioned even more aggressively? Like, if she starts pathing your way, she still only has her bouncing blade. Like, without Sunpo, it's basically just a finish last hit ability, or maybe in full melee matchups can become a viable source of damage. But as a ranged champion, I
Yep.
believe you could have,
Like being up
if
here.
she tried, yeah, I believe you could have positioned yourself like around the 60% of the lane towards her, I mean, or 70 even, to basically zone her even harder from getting at least, like, deny her one or even two of the first um, minion wave minions.
Yep. I agree.
Because, like you said about the whole not standing near her blades, it's basically useless as a ranged champion, and Vlad specifically at level 1, since even if she does poke you with the blade itself, you will heal from your Q. You are a ranged champion, so if she tries to position closer to you to get the XP, you can just spam auto attacks on her.
Yep.
And if she tries to get close to you to trade, you can basically just kite here because you have about the same movement speed at that point.
I would
So
agree. The
yeah,
cool thing about this is, yeah, I'm not going to play this lane perfectly, so it's a really good point.
yeah,
I could have
just
played
trying
what I'm doing
to
right now in that level 1 window as well.
yeah, I'm just trying to see if my thoughts on
No,
how it could have went even more optimized
yep,
in the
no,
first
exactly correct. The one caution I would say is if I was the enemy jungler, because this is like plat diamond, I would
yeah.
actually I would go for a level 2 gank on the Vlad. The problem is it's a trundle, so it's not that good.
Yeah, I was just because
Jarvan,
it's
Lee
not
Sin, Elise,
Leasing, it's not
yeah,
Sacco. Yeah, like yeah,
you
it's
definitely
not
could. All you'd have to
it's not
do
a
is
big threat level
position.
two.
So like remember the VOD review with Galio where I said position on your safest side that you assume the
Yeah,
jungler.
yeah, that's why at this point, like my rule of thumb is always placing my first word at the enemy side and thin wall, like the passage, here,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, at the edge of the river,
Okay.
the part. Yeah, yeah, the point that covers the
Cool.
enemy jungle and the river as well.
Cool.
At the edge of the passage, yeah.
So that's personal preference.
There.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because then I could easily hover over this side and easily avoid any level 2 or 3 ganks from champions that aren't like Evelyn or Sacco, which have invisibility of the, or if they don't have a, what's the word, pike support or something.
Yeah. The counter I would say is it's yes, that's really good vision if you're not good at jungle tracking. If you're good at jungle tracking, you don't need that ward, in my opinion.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I'm just saying about
yeah,
the rule of thumb. Of course,
yeah,
with jungle tracking, you don't even have to do all that.
sure, for sure. Sorry, I should be talking about that. So that's a good point. If you're bad at jungle tracking and as a mid laner, or like you're unsure of where the jungler started because maybe the bot side didn't show or they did show, so maybe Trundle starts top side. This game, I actually assumed Trundle started red buff, but he actually started top side. So I would suggest the ward that you've just said pass is actually a really good one. I would actually go one step further. If I'm worried about a gank here, I would place my ward here because I can actually see him clear raptors. A Trundle is never gonna an enemy jungler in at this time is never gonna gank before he does his raptors. Basically, like there's no window of a enemy jungler like ganking from here, at 2 minutes 30. The only window he could gank from this side, for example, would be his raptors. So what I'd do is I'd go one step further with this ward and actually place it here so I can see vision of when he clears raptors because it gives us like 20 seconds of vision on the jungler rather than like 3 seconds of vision on the jungler here. And then based on his raptors, you can actually see him path topside to you or to here. Whereas this ward here only actually showcases if the enemy jungler is coming into river. So good ward, but make it better. So there's like three rules of 3 levels of warding. Level 1 is just placing it. Level 2 is placing it in the right area. So some people are at level 1 where they just don't place their wards. They forget to. And all you have to do if you're at that level is just place your wards just anywhere. Just place them wherever you think they're right. Just make sure you place them. Level 2 is placing them in the correct spots. So like Pass said, if you're wanting to protect yourself from a jungle gank on a side of the map, you can ward it here, you can ward it here, you can ward it here, you can ward it there. Doesn't really matter. Just place it on the side you think is correct. And then level 3 is place it on the side that you think is correct, but you actually put it on a camp. So for here, you do it here. Same side as blue, you can do it here. You can even ward red buff. Sometimes what I like doing is if I know an enemy jungler is going to end up at their blue or their red, you could actually use this time to go ward this. Like right now, I could technically go up here and ward his blue buff and give us all the information we need. If the blue buff's gone, he's bot side. If the blue buff's up, he's top side. Or he's pathing top side, I should say. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, if we want to get really of the how much you can maximize your usage of the words, of course you can even go for even cheese plays like when I used to at the beginning of my playing as a mid laner, I used to OTP Talon, which after a point I just started using that whole ward blue buff at 150
Yeah.
because it's about the time most junglers start pathing towards the blue side if they started red,
Yep.
and because it's specific for Talon, I mean, but
It works for every mid
most
laner.
times they save the second smite for Scuttle if they know what they're doing, so they are about 50% health at that point. So basically, I was just hard pushing around 3 minutes to 230 every time, and if they started the blue buff with like 40 or 50% HP, I was just going and getting the kill and the buff. And it was about like 60 to 70% effective after I got used to the timing and the use of it. But I'm just using this as an example of, yeah, it can get really impressive how much you can save the game from the first 3 minutes with a good word and
Yep.
something you can do about it depending on the champion you're playing at the moment.
And then you're going to
But
like level 4 with Vision of like you place the ward and then you actually use the
because
information
with
to
his
do
E, I
something.
can get like it's just 2 walls with Talon to get over with his E and
Yep.
directly 1v1 the jungler while he's trying to finish the blue buff.
Yep. It's good. All right. So we'll watch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll watch this play out. So we know actually Trundles didn't start bot side, which I thought he did. So Katarina goes in. What this should signal to me as a Vladimir is that I'm probably going to get ganked. Because this is the first moment of... You could say, okay, Katarina's hit level 3, so she wants to go for a trade. I've also just used my transfusion. So right now I'm out of position. If you look at this, I'm out of position big time here. She sees me, use my Q, and now I'm out of position. I actually miss it as well. Watch what happens. Notice how I save my... Cool. Wow, Trundle Pillar doesn't show. So I missed position completely, and then I suffered for it. Now, I greed. You could say this is incorrect, but watch where I position, and I know Katarina's health. So I greed here, because I know Trundle went back bot side, so I'm completely safe as long as I stay up here. So she TP, we can't see those animations. Cool. So again, I'm hovering topside. This isn't necessarily the correct play. What I probably should have done is actually recalled and just TP'd back into lane, but I didn't. Notice how I'll go aggressive here to try and bait the Katarina to go for a play. Notice. There we go. So you could say the Katarina misplayed this, or I just held my W quite well. So what I was trying to do here is not use my W unless I have to. Katarina dies purely because I probably didn't have to flash either. So that's basically a really good example of how you can turn a gank, a 2v2, into a correct kill. But, I mean, it's based on your enemy misplaying there. I also get greeted here. So I get outplayed basically by being too cocky. I also spam ping my jungler, which isn't the best thing to do. So far, that trade actually goes really well for me. So even though I die, I play super risky to get the kill on Katarina. It was lucky that she dived, I guess. But I used a good opportunity to get an advantage. I basically was holding my W so that I could get a kill there. The Trundle ganking me and like killing me, I probably deserve that because I was playing a little bit too cocky. But in the hindsight of the 1v1, it's actually very worth for me because Katarina's down 12 CS or like 14 CS now and I'm up a kill, which is really good for this matchup. Like Vladimir should not be ahead in this matchup. So I've actually got myself in a real good position even though I played a little bit cocky. Cool. The problem with this wave now, again, if we look at wave management, is this is going to slow push. So let's see what I do once I push this in. Again, I could be playing up here. So similar to the Galio, yeah, so there we go. I'll place that ward. Again, I could be playing more aggressively here, but I know I have a CS lead already, so I'm not trying to force myself to do anything more aggressively. One, because I don't have flash, and two, because I don't really know where Trundle is. I look for a recall there, but it doesn't push in. So the reason I stopped that recall, so again, going back to the theory of wave management, is only recall or roam if you've hard pushed into the wave or your enemy's missing. They're the only times you roam or recall. But I didn't crash the wave, so I did want to get a recall there, but because I didn't crash the wave, I couldn't recall. Cool. And I'm also not playing too aggressive here because one, I don't know where Trundle is, and two, I've already got a CS lead. So I'm quite happy with like a 20 CS lead at 6 minutes. Yes, I could be like limit testing this a bit, but because I don't have flash and because I don't know where Trundle is, I'm controlling my lead based on how well I can get away. So I'm playing quite safe. I'm playing in the middle of the map because I don't actually know where Trundle is. Technically, if I've got this ward, I should be playing towards this side a bit more, but I'm actually playing quite, unsure of where I should be right now. Now I'm hovering this side a bit because I got Trundle. Cool. So we see Trundle. Notice what I do. I path immediately to the opposite side of the map. What I could do here is if I'm wanting to bait the Trundle, because I know Rammus is coming, for example, I could sit like here, depending on his position. So this comes back to enemy ganking and doing two things. When an enemy ganks, you can do one of two things. You can pretend you don't know if you know where that they're ganking you, or you can just play real safe because you know. So if I'm wanting to bait the Trundle into ganking me, I would be positioning here. But if I want to just play safe and I'm scared of the Trundle, I'm going to position over here. But that's all based on if you've got vision of them. Cool, so notice all these pings that I see? Now I start pathing over to the more dangerous spot. Trundle kind of limit ints a bit. Now this is decent map awareness by me. I was a little bit late. I probably could have rotated to this earlier. But instead of going round here, I actually pathed towards down here. As you can see, I sacrificed my wave for the roam. So because I've got a CS lead, I've generated it, I'm okay with sacrificing this CS. So some people might greed for this CS instead of roaming. What I would suggest is if you build a lead and you wave management correctly, you can always sacrifice a wave if you need to roam. That's why you develop early game advantages so that you can roam. I would suggest laning phase should all be about setting up yourself to influence the rest of the map as quickly as possible as a mid laner. You should always be playing for kills outside of your lane as a mid laner once you've developed a lead in your lane, whether it be CS or whether it be kills. In this case, I've got a kill and a CS lead, so that means I can roam and I can sacrifice CS. Cool. I get a kill. All because of my team, but I was just in the right place and I sacrificed CS for it. Awesome. Again, I'm freezing this wave. Because I'm freezing this wave because Katarina just went topside and my top laner just died. So if Katarina goes top, she's not going to get anything here. So I'm completely fine with freezing this if I want. It is going to slow push though because of the mage minions. Cool. Now she comes back. Notice how I could be playing more aggressive here, but because of her position, look how passive she's playing. I don't need to be up here. I can just sit here and deny her without risking my life too much. I don't actually know what this cat's doing. Is she tilted? I'm not sure. I guess she's just waiting for the wave to crash. Now, notice in this situation, in the versus the Galio matchup, what Galio would have done is he would have just stayed here. But what I do is I ward, and then I look for the recall. So again, whenever you hard push into the wave, you either roam or you recall. You need to do that consistently every single time. It doesn't matter if you don't have items. I mean, I have 1.4k, so I can do it. Let's actually go to this. Next in the masterclass is when you're recalling, this is when you should be thinking about your item purchase. And then as soon as you recall, watch what I do. So that's 2, 3, 4 seconds wasted time. What I should have done is I should have recalled and immediately walked up to here. Because I'm full health, I could actually walk out a bit further and buy my items as I'm walking. This saves you about 3 to 4 seconds every time you recall, and it works for basically every single champion. We'll see if I miss any CS because of it. I don't think I will. Actually, I might. Yeah. So because of that recall, I miss 1 CS, which isn't the end of the world. But that's an important one as a mid laner. You should always know what items you're buying, and you should always push out of the wave, of the lane. Of the base as you're buying items. Cool. We don't know where Pyke is, so he could be ganking me here.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Itemization wise, so it's basically this. It's about that whole to know where, to know when to prioritize MR versus armor or armor versus MR. Because, for example, I was looking at the composition at the moment.
Yep.
Basically, they have both Irelia, the ADC, which is almost always AD, and Pyke, which is another burst source of AD, you could say. Versus Katarina, which is AP, but she's also an AoE AP semi-scaling, you could say, assassin.
Yep.
So basically, I was trying to figure out this. Basically, there are many times that there's not a clear answer as to which source of the two is most threatening to your life points, let's say.
Yep.
Like, let's say they have about an equal amount of AP and AD, not in this specific case because there's 4 AD, but I'm saying in another situation, for example.
Yep.
That there is a more balanced distribution of damage. So I was trying to ask this: should you just accept that you won't be able to cover sufficiently both types of damage, or that there's not one of the two being a right choice as far as stopping the damage goes, and just choose the one that's going to be more of a threat to you specifically as a player, based on how you want to play the game?
Yeah.
Can we use that as the factor to decide when there's not a clear answer damage-wise?
Yeah, so the two factors I would use is one, you first look at the traditional composition of the enemy team comp. So if they're heavily AD, that means you'd obviously prioritize armor. The second one is when you're in game, whoever looks like the threat at the moment. So, for example, I wouldn't be building any defensive at this point. Even if I was Irelia, I wouldn't be building defensive yet. For example, but when I would start building defensive is when I start having a problem, or when my team starts having a problem. So let's say Ezreal or something, or one of their champions is like 4-0 or something. I would then start looking at going, okay, I need to start itemizing defensively after my mythic, or depending on what the tempo of the game is, I would then start itemizing defensively on the biggest threat on the enemy team. If they have multiple threats, I'd then go for the one that is going to threaten you the earliest. So let's say the mid laner is your biggest threat. I would itemize against them. So let's say your mid laner's AP and the enemy top lane is AD, but both of them are 4-0. I would itemize defensively first for the AP because that's my immediate threat, and then itemize later if I need to armor for Aurelia, for example. The problem is it depends on your champion and it depends on the items available to you. For mages, it's pretty easy. You could just go a Seeker's Arm Guard. But for Aurelia, the only defensive thing you could build is like plated steel caps. You could then go like a Bramble Vest if you didn't want to go like Executioners or something, but you wanted to be a bit more tanky. But yeah, I would suggest base it on the team composition and then who the biggest threat is on the enemy team. And then how defensive you build depends on how big the lead is and how big the threat is.
Thanks, that helps a lot. A side note, by the way, for Zonias specifically,
Yep.
as AP, since Seeker's Arm Guard was quite nerfed
Yeah.
a couple months ago, I was just wanting to ask, is it maybe, unless like they have too much immediate AD threat to your lane, like a Z, a Fed Z or something,
Yeah.
is it maybe more useful to rush the hourglass? The stopwatch, yeah, the stopwatch.
Yeah, rush
For
stopwatch.
the arm guard.
Yep. I would do that against all-in champs like Talon and Zed, so champions that can very easily turret dive you. If I was a Vladimir, I probably wouldn't, because I should know that I should never get in a situation as a Vladimir where I have to use a stopwatch to get away from like a Zed or a Talon. I should always have my W for that. So build defensively based on your your individual ability. So if you know you can't really, if you're really scared of the Talon or the Zed and you know you're going to fuck up your W and not use it correctly, you build the stopwatch. But if I'm the Vlad and I'm confident in my own ability and my champion, I take the risk and I don't build the stopwatch. I instead will build the Seeker's Arm Guard to be defensive against the poke. If I'm worried about the all-in, I would build stopwatch. If I'm worried about the poke, I would go Seeker's Arm Guard. But yes, Seeker's Arm Guard did get nerfed. What I would do instead is I'd probably just rush Zhonya's completely and forget about my mythic. So if I was really worried about a Zed or an assassin mid lane and I wasn't doing too well, I would just go pure defensive. I wouldn't even try and go my mythic. I would just build Seeker's Arm Guard, stopwatch, and then complete the item.
Yeah, in the cases when you are a scaling champion like Vladimir or Kassadin, rushing Zonias versus heavy burst ADs like Zed and Talon, which we mentioned,
Yeah.
makes pretty much a clear decision.
Yeah.
But in this specific thing, I was just wanting to ask, isn't it though a bit slowing your kill threat if you are a more early threat AP, like maybe, I don't know, Silas perhaps, who can get very useful at already from level 6, so like he wants to build a fair amount of AP as soon as he can, or Fizz maybe, or something similar, like AP Assassins,
Yeah.
I mean.
Yep.
Like, even when against the Z, isn't it like better to, even though it would be similarly useful to rush the Zonias?
It all comes back to that.
Still do it, or do we prioritize the damage?
Yeah, it all comes back to the same point of how confident are you in your own abilities and what is the state of the lane. So if Zed's 4-0 and I'm 0-4, I'm going to be building Zhonya's. If I've fucked my early game, I'm going to just give up on rushing Mythic and being a presence, and I'm going to go defensive. Why? Because if I'm 0-4, chances are someone on my team is maybe doing a little bit better. Because if I'm 0-4, it's because the enemy jungler's camped me or something like that. Or there's never a reason I'm 0-4 just in a 1v1. There's always an external factor that happens. So I'd be just counting on, okay, I'm going to build defensive because right now that's my most immediate problem. I just need to survive. So it's almost like a hierarchy of needs. Your need to survive is more important than your need to do damage. Because if you're dead, it doesn't matter how much damage you've got. If you can't even do the damage in the first place, it's useless, right? So I would always go defensive first, if in doubt, and then offensive. So in this situation, I wouldn't be building defensive at all because I'm ahead. If it was even, I wouldn't. If I'm behind, I start building defensive. If I'm a Fizz, again, I would probably go Zhonya's first because Zhonya's on Fizz is actually not a bad first item. If I was a Sylas, yeah, I wouldn't play Sylas into Zed. Just because my Sylas as an individual isn't very good, and Sylas can't really counter Zed that well. Post level 6, it can get a little bit dicey. But yeah, I would just itemize defensively if you're behind. But if it's even, I wouldn't worry too much about defense until it becomes a problem. If you're worried about the Zed level 6, or if you're versing Zed right, what I would do as the best counter is I would go Exhaust if I was worried about him. So if I was worried about him in Champion Select, I'd just build Exhaust, and that gives you a lot of breathing room. Because as long as you exhaust every time he death marks you or whatever, you're going to be pretty okay. Like, if you can't survive that, it means you've done something wrong. But yeah, then you just build defensive if you're behind. Cool, so I push the lane in and I roam. As we see, we'll end up getting a kill. So I leave, right? Because I know I've killed Irelia because of the ult. And I want to get back to lane as soon as possible. Cool. So I ping miss of my team because I know Katarina could be going, but she's not. Well played by my team, to be honest. Oh no, I think the game's frozen. Alright, cool. That's actually all I wanted to do with that one anyway. It's getting to an hour and a half. So that focused a lot on early game, and I guess we haven't focused much on mid game and late game for this masterclass. What I'd suggest as players is early game is by far the biggest problem for the majority of mid laners. If you can set up your early game to be consistently correct, chances are you're going to have a pretty good mid to late game. So as mid laners, while we didn't really get to talk too much about mid and late game, what I'd suggest is the majority of you are going to have to focus on your early game anyway. So this class has been good for that. The best way to focus on your mid and late game, let's just present this. The biggest way to focus on your mid and late game as a mid laner is to just get in the situations themselves and just do things. So like whether your identity is split pushing, if it's team fighting, I would generally just recommend playing to your champion's identity in the mid late game and just playing that out. But yeah, so briefly, this masterclass, we covered a little bit, or mainly just laning phase, ward management, wave management, champion identity, building defensively. Does anyone have any questions from the session or anything they want to ask about mid lane in general?
Not so far, no.
Okay, awesome. Well, that is actually the end of it. I've got a couple of videos that I'm gonna link everyone as really good resources for mid lane. One's on wave management. The next one's on timing efficiency, particularly buying in base, but we covered that a little bit. One of them's trading, and the other one's roaming. So I'm going to put those in the bootcamp resources. These are videos that are free on YouTube that are just really well done videos that I'd suggest you watch. But the biggest thing with mid lane I'd suggest that people struggle with is 1, laning phase, and 2, your champion identity. So a lot of people will try and play their champion incorrectly and force them into something they're not, which is a really big problem. So step 1 as a mid laner, just play the champion the way it's meant to be played, And if you have to adapt your playstyle, only do it because of like a situation in that game. Don't adapt your playstyle or your champion's identity for no reason. So firstly, if you don't know your champion pool's identity, you need to figure that out. Like if you don't know what Silas is meant to do, if you don't know what Kassadin's meant to do, if you don't know what your champions are meant to do, you need to figure that out as a step one. Step two is figuring out what you need to do to play to that champion identity. Do you need to push? Do you need to freeze? Do you need to go for kills? Do you need to go for roams? As a baseline, if you know your champion's identity and you know how to play towards it, you're always going to have a good laning phase as long as you've got your vision and jungle tracking at a standard level. There should never be a situation as a mid laner where you die more than once 1v1. If you're dying more than once 1v1 to your enemy mid laner, you are doing something really wrong and you need to fix that straight away. Whether you're overplaying your champion's identity. So if you're a Talon and you're dying more than once in your lane 1v1, it's because you're pushing your limits too hard. It's not acceptable to die more than once 1v1 in your lane. If you're dying more than once, it means you've done something wrong, either in your early game or something in that moment that has led up to that second death. It should never happen. You should only have one room for error per laning phase. If you're having more than that, that's one of the biggest problems you got to fix first, and you got to identify why it's happening. The second one is if you die to ganks more than twice in laning phase, again, you're doing something wrong. I would again only give yourself one death per game from enemy ganks as a buffer. Ideally, you want 0 for both of these. Ideally, you never want to die 1v1 and you never want to die to a gank, right? But in terms of measuring success of how well you're warding, how well you're jungle tracking, and how good your mastery is of your champion in the early game, if you are dying more than once to either ganks or 1v1s, you are doing something wrong on your champion. I don't care if you're getting 400 gold leads because of it and you're dying multiple times. It's just not fundamentally how you should play the game. But I guess it comes back to your personality and how you want to play the game. If you want to just permanently limit test and go for high kills, high deaths, that's fine. But if you want to fundamentally improve as a player, those are two really good rules to go through with mid lane. The next one is, again, I would always use mobalytics to measure a bit of success for you. I'm not sure if I've got an account that's pure mid lane at the moment. Okay, cool.
It's on OC, IOC.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
What the fuck? Should be there. Let's have a go. Oh, there we go. Cool. I think this is... I play mid lane the majority of this. Oh, mobalytics mine. Okay, cool. We're working. Okay, awesome. So some good facts to look at for mid lane on how you're doing well in the early game is all of this. On mobalytics, which is completely free. Don't worry too much about these. They kind of just, a vanity metrics, I would say. But what I would look at particularly is the best indicator of if you're doing well in lane is how much you're coming out ahead at 15 minutes in terms of goal difference. So for example, let's see what my rumble's at. Okay, it's freezing. But while it's waiting, a good sign that you're playing better in the early game than the average opponent you're versing is if you're plus 200 goal difference or more. Okay, it's just disappeared. If you're plus 200 goal difference or more, it means as a general indicator, you're doing pretty well in your laning phase and you probably need to move on to your mid/late game as an individual. The next one is damage share. So damage share is a really good indicator of how well you do over the whole game, and you got to take it in relation to your champion. So if you're playing Tryndamere, for example, your damage share is probably traditionally going to be a bit lower because you're split pushing a lot. Similar to you, Pass, if your identity, you like to split push a lot, your damage share on average is going to be lower. As a general indicator for a mid laner, you should be anywhere from 22 to 25% damage share if you're playing traditional mid laners who like to team fight. If you're playing mid laners and you like to split push, one, I would suggest, in my opinion, I don't think split pushing as a mid laner is the meta at the moment, and I think it can bring a lot of problems. But if you as an individual can make that work and you find it works and you have success on it, you then should be aiming for a damage share of like something in between like 19 to 22%.
Which is where I'm also at the moment.
Yeah.
And I've also found it quite fits me since you mentioned it, because I've managed to consistently create the scenario of they send one to back and stop my push.
Yeah.
And since I managed to have the solid laning with Irelia at least, it's the only solid champion I know at the moment.
Yep.
I basically win most 1v1s on the side lane and get a kill because Irelia has a good sticking power. So then I managed to force them to make another one come, and then it's suddenly a 4v3 when it was like a 5v4 in the mid Aram thing. And still get towers. Yeah, it's getting quite ideal, let's say.
Yeah.
Getting kills and turrets in a row along with all the CS from the waves from pushing.
Yep. And
it's quite useful actually, yeah.
Yeah, keep going for it. As soon as it stops working, you might need to reassess it, but if it keeps working for you, the chances are as well, the higher rank you get, the more likely it's going to work more often as well. So if you're finding it's already working for you now, chances are that is just going to only do better as you get higher and higher, because your team's going to know how to play around it better and better. Yes, the enemy's also going to know how to play around it better and better, but Irelia is a very good solo champion, so you're always going to be able to get those kills and get that really good pressure. The next stat that you can't see here is it's like a damage mitigated. It's like it's how much damage you deal per minute compared to your enemy mid laner. So again, depending on your champion identity, it will vary, but what you should be aiming for is like a plus 50 to 150 depending on your champion. So for me, I'm at plus 78. If you're a split pusher, you might be negative here, particularly based on your damage share. You might be negative. So that also is dependent on your champion and your playstyle, but what I would suggest is if you're unsure what your performance overview averages should look like, go to League of Graphs, find a player who plays your champion a lot, find their name and then look them up on Mobalytics and compare your performance overview to theirs, and then see and benchmark your stats against theirs to figure out where you're going wrong. If you're unsure of what benchmarks you should be looking for. The next one is ganks. If you're honestly not averaging 3 ganks at 15 minutes as a mid laner, and you're playing something like Rumble, Ziggs, any mid laner that's pretty conventional, Irelia might be a little bit harder. Even Irelia, you can still roam a lot. I would suggest 3 ganks at 15 minutes is a really good benchmark to be aiming for as a mid laner. If you're not ganking 3 times in 15 minutes, I would actually say, again, you're playing the lane wrong. If you've got a 200 gold lead, if you're dealing more damage, if you're dealing this much damage, you should be getting off 3 ganks per 15 minutes in the early game. If you're not, I would suggest that's a really good place to work on, particularly if you're one of those players who goes, my team is shit, or my team never does anything, or I've got a bad jungler. Actually go help them and then see what happens if they're still bad. Some games they're still going to be bad. You could gank bot lane like 3 times in a row and they're still going to lose lane. That's going to happen. But what you do is you reduce your chances. So as a mid laner, my philosophy of mid lane is win lane, and then extend the lead out as quickly as possible. So as soon as you win lane, you should immediately be looking to influence the rest of the map. So whether that's just helping your jungler take scuttle, or whether that's ganking top lane, you should always be looking outside of your lane as quickly as possible as a mid laner, and almost position yourself as a secondary jungler. You should be roaming as much as you can as soon as you establish a lead. Even if you're not that good of a roaming champion like Irelia, for example, or like maybe you think like Yasuo's not a very good roamer, just the threat of you coming into bot lane, regardless of if you get a kill or not, just the threat of you being off the map and actually showing up bot lane and maybe burning a flash is so beneficial for your team and so tilting for the enemy that just the psychology of it alone is worth it. So even if you don't think your champion is a very good roamer, if you get a wave pushed in, you should be roaming. And if you're not getting roams off, it generally means you're doing something wrong in your laning phase. Does anyone have any questions? Otherwise, I can end the class just here because we're coming up to 2 hours. But I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Maybe a bit less relevant of a question, but since it's at the end, I guess I might just as well. About my secondary role, which now is jungle.
Yep.
I was just looking to figure out when, in the cases of my only, let's say, viable slash successful lane is the mid one,
Yep.
which we're talking about pretty much. How should I work around helping? Because it's not one of the two sides of the map. Like it doesn't make either Drakes or Heralds directly easier to get when they have prio. How should I work around helping mid lane um, expand to the point of getting the game and creating breath room for the two side lanes that are lost as a jungler?
The best way is ganking,
What point
counter
of
ganking,
the
and vision. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Like I'm just asking what point of the mid laners play opportunities should I focus on helping most? Like as a mid laner, what would he need to be assisted on most to create a lead on the other lanes? Aside from helping him get a kill and freeing him to roam. I mean,
that's the
is there
biggest
something
thing you
more
can.
than that?
No, that's the biggest thing you can do, and then it's up to them to push that lead. A lot of mid laners won't do it. You'll find
I
a lot of
guess.
mid laners will get the kill from their jungler, and then they'll stay in lane. Um, the
Yeah.
typical thing of what a mid laner should do is, as soon as you get a gank and it's successful, you then go help the person who ganked you. So if they're like the support, you go help bot lane. If they're the jungler, you go help do the jungler whatever they want to do. So it's really in the mid laner's hands. As the jungler, you can only do so much. You can set up the vision, you can gank for them, you can get kills for them. But if they don't want to roam, you can't. What I would
Yeah,
suggest
I
is
mean,
if you're trying to help get them to do something, what I'd do is after you get the gank on them and it's successful, ask for assistance on an objective that you want. So let's say you get the gank mid. That means you have Rift or Dragon priority depending on your top and bot lane. So whichever one you have
yeah,
priority
I
on,
already do that.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I
what I'd
don't split it
suggest.
into heralds and dragons.
Yeah,
Just that heralds and dragons don't, let's say, salvage 2 or 3 kills of a difference in the side lanes. That's what I'm trying to say. Because, like, I managed to get to maybe 1, 2, 3 objectives just by creating prio on mid,
yeah,
because it has the option of going both on herald and dragon
yeah,
once they have prio. But it still doesn't manage. Of course, I don't say I'm a good jungler or anything. I'm just trying to figure things out as I go.
yep,
But yeah, I mean, even after translating it to objectives, I just find it still isn't as impactful as maybe it would be necessary to salvage the big difference when it happens on a side lane or worst case scenario on both side lanes. That's what
yeah,
I'm trying to figure out how to carry in a sort of way.
yeah,
Because if we have a proper mid laner or at least a fed, even mediocre mid laner, it can still become pretty salvageable. I'm just trying to figure out how to work around it.
Yeah. The two principles, because I play jungle probably 40% of my games. The two principles I go is one, traditional matchup wise, how does each lane go? So when I'm a jungler during champion select, laning phase, and before minions spawn, I break down each lane and build a hypothesis on that lane. So I go, top lane, my laner is going to win, or my lane is going to go even, or my lane is going to lose. A Y, X, Y, Z, champion this, champion that. Mid lane, same thing. Bot lane, same thing. I then watch that play out. So there's two ways to watch it play out. One, passively, by just jungle clearing and looking at the wave as you're clearing jungle. So using your function keys. I don't know if you do that as a jungler. I'd suggest you do if you do. This is turning into a bit of a jungle thing. But the second one is I then will try and gank each lane and see how they react to the gank. Now, this isn't the ultimate indicator of how good a player is, but generally, if a lane doesn't react to your gank, you've either ganked at the wrong time. So if they're pushed into your turret, it's probably not a good time to gank because they're going to go for the CS over the gank. Or two, the player playing that champion isn't a very good player, and so then I eliminate them as a win condition. So I'm pretty strict when I play jungle of if one of my lanes doesn't respond well when I do a good gank, if I know it's objectively a good gank and they don't respond, I kind of like give up on them or put them on the side and I go, I'm going to try another lane and see what they do. And then I use like a process of elimination to figure out which of my individuals on my team for that specific game are playing their best League of Legends or the better League of Legends. And I then funnel resources and like priority onto them for ganks and for control and for helping. So yeah, you could like look at it as like I'm always just going to help mid lane and hope that they can then pressure the rest of the map. Or you can look at it of like on a game by game basis. Try and fix or help the lane that is showing the most potential. Which is pretty easy to replicate. That's what I'd suggest. But yeah, let's probably not go into jungle anymore. But that's what I'd suggest as a jungler.
Yeah, it doesn't end. Jungling is a constant headache, even when you're used to it. Yeah, thanks anyway.
No, it's alright.
It was nice.
Yeah, if no one has any more questions, I can I'll probably end it here because we're getting up to 2 hours, so I think it was a pretty good session. Was there anything anyone missed or wanted to know about? Because I can put some follow-up resources for that if you want. Like, if you feel like I didn't cover anything or something you want to know more information about, I'm happy to get some resources on that you guys can watch in your own time. No? Okay, cool. Well, that's going to be the end. Thank you for coming. I know we've got a pretty small class today. There was only 3 of us. There were a few that popped in for a little bit. But yeah, thanks guys. Thanks Pass Guru and 2%. Thanks for your questions and interaction as well. And yeah, I'll see you on the next masterclass if you guys are joining it.
Thank you for all the info, man.
No worries.
Count on it. We'll see you there.
Thank you. See ya.
Have a good